and it was very interesting to understand your use cases. So while we are focused a lot on one part of the world where there's a lot of revenue opportunities, but occasionally we see all of these very interesting cases, and we hope that we can work more on those.
So I can name some names of customers. So
marketing department put it on its website.
So we have a customer along similar lines, a company, bank called Standard Bank of South Africa, and it's a very interesting use case, one of my favorites, where the challenge they had was they wanted to reach out and open bank accounts for some of the lower income people, and to do that they had to verify address, and that was very hard for people to do because they couldn't bring proof of address. So they provided to their agents an application on which requires a smartphone, but an application that would allow them to go right up to where the people lived and verify their address physically to see whether they'll open an account for them. And the other part of this application is the ability then to check your bank balance using not necessarily a smartphone, a feature phone, just using text messages. You can check your bank balance, you can pay your electricity bill, you can pay your, you can transfer money and so on. And so very critical ability through smartphones and feature phones to reach a very different segment of the population that one would not normally target, and make a big difference from alleviation of poverty, helping people just transact business that they couldn't afford otherwise. So there's a slew of applications that do agree where it typically starts very much with the remittances, payments, money transfers, and so on and so forth. But we're seeing use cases which are around selling their farm produce, checking on prices for farm produce, pulling some of their goods in that they want to sell, which are really, really interesting coming up now. So we're providing a lot of the infrastructure around these kind of things, a very broad set of capabilities around the money transfers, remittances, payments, etc. At least that use cases we've seen for our solutions, and pushing further some of the custom solutions that will become difficult economically for us.
So I have some experience in this. At RIM, we actually run app stores for Airtel and Aircel and a number of carriers in India. And you go in and talk to their CTO, they say, I want you to build applications in the local languages. There's masses of people coming in from feature phones to smartphones. What are their first applications going to be like? So the opportunity is immense.
I have a question regarding privacy and trust. So do you think that the employees have enough confidence or trust that the enterprise applications will not be recording any of their personal stuff, especially in wake of when we have seen some recent applications name of debugging were key tapping? So
I think some of that is an OS problem, where I can speak to what BlackBerry is doing is, as Manish alluded to, is you have two workspaces on the device, and on the consumer workspace, the enterprise has no visibility, right? Or the carrier.
But do the users have enough confidence that it works?
No, they don't. I mean, that especially is a big issue. You absolutely raise the issue. That's why there was recently a big revolt in an East Coast company when they were trying to deploy mobile device management MDM solution. When people realize that company will know every single application they have downloaded, how much time they have spent on Angry Birds, they will be able to limit their email if they download the blacklisted application. You pretty much say, wait a minute, it's my device, I paid for this, I can't do this, I can't do that. Why am I paying $700 for this device? Go suck an egg. I'm not gonna go BYOD. So there's a user revolt of privacy issue because of the device management. That's why the next generation of this movement in mobility is not device level. I don't care what you do on your device. I just care about corporate data and access and control of corporate data. That's the way to look at it. So point is, the market was too nascent. This is like the Big Bang theory is the first 10 minutes of Big Bang. Large objects are flying in all directions. We have no idea what shape they will take. So it's too early. But these are, you're asking the right question. That question should be asked every day.
Let me add, so on the privacy side, what's happening, there is no case law today on the mobile privacy, still is being developed, so there's not a lot of guidance. So what's happening in a lot of companies before they roll out BYOD or any of the other mixed environment, they basically have what you call governance team. So they have HR, legal, different groups, and then come up with a policy when put in the workbook or make sure the employees agree to it. And they try, a lot of companies are trying different things to do, and depending where the users are. If they're in Germany, they have to of course follow that rule, versus in US and some other countries, the case laws are not still very clear. So you're going to see company after companies, there's a little bit difference we're seeing from extreme lockdown to non-lockdown. And I think this privacy as a whole, not many people are talking about it, but it just wait for some couple of cases go in the courts, and that's what becomes a big issue.
Actually, I'll give you a quick comment, and again, in the context of BYOD, and while there is a consumer workspace and a work workspace, your issue is spot on, because if you look at your basic PIM apps on the device, phone app, address book, email, is that a personal app or is that a work app? The reality is it's actually both. And I think that's where you start to get into data separation issues. And certainly we are kind of, looking at ways to solve that problem ourselves within, but that is certainly on the edge, because you tend to use email for work and personal, likewise your address book for work and personal. So because the last thing you want to do is when they do wipe your device, you don't want them to wipe your personal contacts, obviously. So it's certainly some edge cases which are still being worked on.
Slightly different topic. One of the key attributes of a mobile device is location. Location works very well outdoors. It doesn't work as well indoors without. Oh wow! I think he's the one who said large objects flying around.
Everybody get back.
It's pretty large. So one of the key attributes of a mobile device is location through GPS. Location works very well outdoors, but doesn't work as well indoors without help from the infrastructure like Wi-Fi access points and so on. So one, do you know of any device makers, you happen to be from one of those companies, or opportunities in the space of indoor location where you do not need as much help from the infrastructure, but the device alone is able to track you down as to whether you're in this conference room or that conference room through a finer version of GPS or anything along those lines?
Yeah, actually, I think, in fact, I want to say I just saw or read about some startup in the last couple of days, which is actually building, helping a company build essentially its campus map so that people can use it intra-campus. And so there's certainly an opportunity in that space, and certainly there's guys out there that have been building their Wi-Fi databases, and as this whole geofencing and location-based world has evolved, there's guys that are building technology. So I think eventually, I don't know if device vendors will go after that market, or it will just fit into part of the infrastructure that an enterprise guy buys. And in fact, I'm curious to hear Ajay's perspective, being a Wi-Fi guy also. But I think that intelligence is getting there, and probably what the enterprise needs is infrastructure or some enabling software to be able to map their campus. It's no different from having a campus map. You just need a much more granular campus map so that it can be useful. You need a lat-long version of your campus map.
There are other ways. You can enable your RFID, and you can also track the devices. You can also do with the Bluetooth. So there are many ways to do the mapping.
So yeah, I've been looking at this for the last 10 years, and what happens is that people want the location, but they don't want to pay you anything. And that's the one problem. The other thing is that you can do y-axis, but z-axis is a problem. The amount of upfront work you do to get the return is always is quite high, because now if you have to define this room and everything, it's just too much upfront work. It continues to be the, is that how real the problem is, how many applications are, it's not narrowing down the problem and market, it becomes smaller and smaller. And that has been a lot of challenge. A lot of companies going from Wi-Fi, they couldn't get funded because the market size is just not big enough. Yes, you can always, sometimes there's a big news about RFID or something and you see big market, but it hasn't happened, you notice, in a big scale. So it's really just, so just opportunity is not there, or maybe people don't want to pay for the what the benefit they get. That's my experience, my experience for the last 10 years.
So I think my real question is, you want to check that? Reminds me of cricket back home, sir. So way back when GPS was not available to a layperson, every person who has a mobile device now, right? Because it was a military technology that was used by the military. I'm wondering if there's something more finer than GPS, the version of GPS we have today, which I hope they do have when they throw bombs at certain targets. They have to be very accurate. So do you anticipate that technology becoming available to the everyday user at some point in time, if there one exists? And that would solve this problem of requiring the infrastructure.
Actually, the real GPS is finer than what they allow commercial.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one.
I'd like to switch gears completely. For years and years and years, there was an argument that 802.11n or some other Wi-Fi technology would penetrate the enterprise and replace the Ethernet connections to desktops. What does the panelists think about that? Is 802.11n the answer, or is it something else, or is it never going to happen?
It's already happened. And more exciting, I mean, our whole company runs with keys on wireless. He has no microphone. It's already happening. I mean, that thing, our whole company runs on 11n. We have I think nobody has a physical connection.
Company, from what I understand, and it has not happened in the mainstream.
Yeah, so I think it's a matter of
It's still a 100 base T, 1,000 base T world.
Yeah. But I think that's coming, and one of you guys may be more closer with this.
So, one thing I learned very early on in my first wireless class, that wireless is a scared spectrum or a scared resource. So the wire line is always going to be ahead than wireless. You know, so 802n, I mean, 802n solves some problem, but the people's expectation is now 1,000 gig, gig type of expectation. So the wireless is always behind. Wireless is more about convenience and gets you certain. I mean, it's like it complements wireline, but it's never going to get the same kind of experience what you have on the wireline just because it's always a scale.
What I'm asking is, are companies going to jettison?
A company's going to jettison their wireline Ethernet connections and replace that anytime soon or in the future with some form of wireless to the desktop.
A lot of companies are now doing cubicle because every year, the 5 or 6 times they change cubicles. A lot of companies don't have the wireline connection anymore. They're just using 802.11n or other because of the cost of putting on these wires.
802.11 AC is here now, and AD is coming, and in the campuses we will be able to use the white space to do the modulation of the Wi-Fi. So all these things are coming.
So I'm not arguing that it's not coming, it's just that expectation of the user is also getting ahead. So the wireless is always a complementary to wireline, and that's how I see it for the last 20 years. It just never gets there, what the expectation goes high.
You know the TV white space that has opened up between 700 megahertz to 900 megahertz. You can do the AM modulation of Wi-Fi on those.
Yeah. I'm not saying, I'm just saying expectation is always higher.
Yeah, so I have a different type of question. So as one of the panelists pointed out, so the smartphone fits in your pocket, it is very handy, quite mobile. But from the form factor point of view, I like the iPad. So do you see merging of both these things or interfacing each other and coming up some different one?
But Samsung's already done that, and I thought they call it the phablet, which is the phone plus the tablet. So I mean, vendors are already attempting it. Again, it really will vary based on use case, because as I think I mentioned earlier that there are certainly a class of use cases that work well for the phone, but there's certain class of use cases that are just difficult to read or browse on the phone, and so those use cases, to the extent those take shape in the enterprise, may likely drive the bigger form factor.
And there may be use cases where you start off on one and finish on the other. Right? You get an email with an attachment, you throw it to the tablet to see the whole thing.
Is the formulate something which unfolds into it?
No, it's just it's physically bigger than a.
It's just a bigger.
It's a bigger phone.
What I'm talking about.
So actually, there is an ASUS tablet now on called Pad Phone. It's just coming out, and there is a little slot for the phone itself that goes inside the tablet and it becomes a tablet. So you can actually use it as a phone. At the same time, you can take the phone out and use it as a smaller device. I have a question. So I've been working at companies that are not as sophisticated when it comes to the applications that some of you folks talked about. So today, the most common application of tablets is still, at least the companies I've been at, which is mostly networking and security companies. Employees go in, they log into the wireless, they start downloading their emails, they go to meetings, they're taking a lot of notes, they go to the website, they go VPN into the network, or they are inside the network, they're doing a lot of browsing, they look at a file, they download the file. So I'm trying to understand how in a container-based approach versus I guess, I don't know if it's the MDM approach, but the entire OS approach, how do you handle, because there's a lot of behavior involved, and then how do you control that aspect? In particular, the email part of it, and downloading the files, and then taking notes, those kind of things.
Exactly, just like you said. On your iPad, you log into your secure container, and inside the container you can open documents, you can take notes, you can edit, you can do your email, which is isolated from your personal email outside. The whole idea is to give you a full work office environment inside a container, not take over the device. Outside the device is your personal world, do whatever you like.
How do you stop them from getting on a regular?
That's a data leakage prevention. You got a built-in technology. That's why it took us 2.5 years to build this thing. There are all kind of protection, data leakage, you cannot enter. So it's pretty sophisticated stuff. To make things simple, a lot of complexity has to go in.
I just want to make sure I understand your question. If you can repeat your question.
So I take my Android tablet, I connect to the Wi-Fi, I start downloading my email. That's corporate email, right? So when we talk about security elements, so in Bitsel mobile environment, it's pretty clear that you're going to keep it isolated, and then also prevent the employee to actually use your traditional email mechanisms. But how do you secure the corporate email, or how do you prevent that when the person leaves the company? I still have my corporate email as long as I don't delete that account. And then the other behavior is a lot of the people go to the meetings, take notes, keep it on and there are a lot of sophisticated information in there. So in an environment like that, in the model that you use, how do you kind of bring that security?
So the first one you asked about how do we protect the corporate data versus personal data. So basically, as bids are doing, our solution also gives the corporate basically not a container, but it's more about a tool and selective information, selective wipe, selective way of doing things very early on, which basically enables you to achieve the same things. Like how do you protect your corporate data, and how do you let the person bring it in and use their personal stuff without hijacking the user experience, or just making sure the user experience continues to stay the same. So it's not just about tool, it's also about setting the policy? How do you want to treat your employees? Every employee, each company, you have different level of employees and what their policies should be. Just like any other, if you're coming from the networking background, it's the same problem. It's a granular policy you set, and just like on laptops. So we want to make sure that not to reinvent the wheel, basically just let you do what you do best, and at the same time they give you the tool so you can manage and control what matters to you without hijacking the user experience, and make sure the absolute native experience continues to be there. And that is what users like, and therefore when IT puts some tools on it, they don't say that, hey, I don't want to use it anymore, please take this out. They say, hey, I'm okay with use it.
So, just to add to what has been said, you see, there are very well-defined ways of dealing with the issues that you just described, right? So, for example, you see, I think we also as enterprise, we don't want to disturb the user experience. So, for example, we don't want to reinvent a new email client. We want you to use the same email client that comes with the iPad or that comes with with your iPhone, that you're used to. But what happens is that you create two profiles, right? A personal profile and a corporate profile. So what happens is that all the data that belongs to the corporation is in the control of its corporate control, and your own data is in your control. So when you leave, that data gets, as Ajay said, is selectively wiped, right? Let me give you another use case. How many of you have SharePoint in your work, right? A lot of you have, if you don't know it. But if you want to access, those docs, right? Sometimes you'll get an email link to a SharePoint document, right? So for example, we have an app. It's an application that's part of our solution, which actually is a SharePoint client, but it is not under. It's more of something you get from Zenprice, and also it connects into your corporate SharePoint. So when you get a document, it goes into the storage of that app, right? So any docs that you get onto the device are subject to different policies that, as Ajay said, depending on if you're a CEO, you probably can do one set of operations, but let's say if you are someone else, you might only see a document for a period of time, right? Or you may only read the document but not store it locally. Or you cannot print it, or you cannot open that app in a third app, right? So for example, you disable, for example, storing a document you download into, let's say, a Dropbox. So I think the key is that what we're trying to do is that we don't want to ruin your experience, but we put enough controls that if they are sanctioned by the corporation, right? So corporate policy is no doc to be uploaded to Dropbox. As an example, I've seen this policy in many companies. So we will then enforce that policy. So I think you should think of it that way.
So how do you enforce it when somebody takes a print screen on these devices? So I think security is a lot psychological, which we are probably not looking at. You put containers, you put what, you take print screen, what do you do?
Yeah, look, as I think several people have said here, that this is still an emerging field. There are a lot of legal issues around it, right? So companies, what they are doing is that they are making you agree to a term of conditions. To say, okay, guys, look, if someone wants to steal corporate data, they can do it, okay? Right now, this is a very early place. I remember the first time I got my laptop. It was a Sun Microsystem. It was 1995. It was a big like this, but I was happy like crazy because I could take that home, right? Because I had a Sun workstation at work, right? So the point is that we are in that same arena, in that same time where new things are being defined, and you could steal data, but I think corporations are defining this. They're trying to make their employees be good citizens and say, look, don't do this. There's so much we can do to prevent it. And as they say, those are good things to have. But at the end of the day, there are going to be people who will do those things. But just so you know that there are ways to also prevent taking screenshots, except on iOS.
Hi, I have a quick question. There are a couple of issues that come up on a performance perspective typically when you have two different workspaces running on your machine. So you have the personal workspace as well as the professional workspace. So if BYOD really takes off, do you see an issue with performance-based issues just because they're concurrent consumer apps running? And secondly, kind of interrelated but a slightly different question is, currently do you see the trend of, purchase behavior being driven by, professional users who have a preference for a certain device, or is it a policy being being promoted by the corporation itself, like use, everyone, we prefer that you use a Apple, an iPad or a RIM or so and so. I mean, do you see a change in those?
Absolutely, there's a big sea change going on. For the 20 years, IT department decided what device you should have. So I think that era of communism is gone. Now people decide what device they want, and because we are currently deployed at Chevron and Exxon and in Shell, the 3 places I know personally, the mandate came from the boardroom. When some board members say, why can't I access this thing on this device? And when that comes from top down, then the CIO has to listen. So this is a sea change. User will choose what device, and corporate will decide what data they can access. This is a sea change, and that's coming. That's why it's exciting. Performance thing, I can how you implement it. If you go with a VMware approach or toggle when you're in 2 persona, yes, huge issues in performance. If you take some other company like Mokana, they have if you have 20 apps, there are 20 different VPN tunnels starting from the device going to the back thing. Very expensive on power, expensive on licenses. So again, the devil is in the detail. What Bitzer does is we have a secure container with 1 app tunnel. All corporate traffic is channeled through the app tunnel. And our container is an app. It takes no more power than you running your LinkedIn app. So it's all in the implementation. There are a lot of people who have done it wrong. That's why you got to talk to the new kid in the block. We are pure play, fresh start.
In terms of devices, what we found is, if you try to do a pure BYOD policy where you've got a lot of different devices with different form factors, different obviously platforms and manufacturers, it becomes a little expensive, complicated to manage, particularly as you roll out more and more applications. So what, as an example, internally within SAP, what we're doing is a balance. As people request for a certain set of devices, and we believe they make sense, we approve more and more of them for BYOD, and that allows us to kind of manage it in a way where 90-95% of our users are satisfied, not necessarily 100% perhaps, but the costs stay containable of managing.
So in the context of enterprise mobile apps, what type of apps or what type of use cases you see for web apps versus native apps? Clearly, in the consumer space, people prefer consumer like native apps, but how do you see that adoption in the enterprise environment?
Yeah, you got to take care of all of them, because there's a web app, HTML5 app, and native app. So the correct solution should address all 3. Again, you cannot dictate to user, you can only run web apps. There will be native apps, because native apps take advantage of the SDK of the device, all the cool things device offers. So the right solution, enterprise mobility, should address all 3.
And from what we see at a consumer app store and an enterprise app store is an evolution. So certainly right now you see a lot of emphasis on native. But slowly there are classes of applications that are emerging that are HTML5. And as the capabilities of HTML5 improve, I think there'll be more and more of that. For the enterprise, to me, it makes a lot of sense to go HTML5. It's cross-platform.
No offline using, that's about the security guys.
So yeah, and HTML5 is trying to address some of those things, and so it's going to be a matter of time, I think.
Yeah, what I'm seeing actually that if your first application doesn't succeed, you're not going to get the second application. Okay, so don't start on. Most of our customers who are successful, they don't boil the ocean. They start with one application and make sure that's native and very, very successful. And then they do 2, and once they have 20, 30 applications, then they start looking at how do I do cross-platform and a lot of other things. So make sure that if you want to be hero in your company, your first application has to be the best you can put forward. And if you do native, and most of the customers where we have seen success, they do native to make sure that's the best application. And if they do that, they're hero, and now they got a big budget and they can do a lot more application.
Yeah, I can just add very interesting scenarios. That first of all, I think HTML5 is up and coming. I think in 5 years, you were asking. I think in 5 years, I think HTML will be extremely compelling. But I think today, native is where things are, and I have seen a scenario where they are developing enterprise apps and they are letting the users actually rate them. And generally, if your application is not the snappiest and fastest and the coolest, right, people won't adapt it. So I think native for today, but HTML5 is up and coming.
And the laptop guys don't know how to write good mobile app, just that you know. So make sure you have someone who understands UX in your team. That's very important from day one, because laptop guys say here's a big 50 fields web app and you just use it on mobile, but users don't like it.
Actually, one quick comment I was going to say is, when I look out in the future, I think HTML5 and native will likely coexist. I think, native certainly still to this day allows you a ability to do a deeper integration with the platform, and I think it's that deep integration into the fabric of the platform that enables a great, compelling user experience. So that is important. Now, depending, again, there's a lot of simple apps people do in HTML5, so when people ask me, actually, we talked briefly about SharePoint. My team was owning the SharePoint app at BlackBerry. We actually started with the premise, maybe we can do it in HTML5. We quickly realized that we wanted to integrate it really deeply into the PIM. We wanted to integrate it with things like Dropbox and these new emerging cloud storage mechanisms, and we quickly realized that it wasn't going to be able to allow us to do that. So I think it depends on the requirements, though I don't think there's one size fits all.
So we have time for a couple more questions.
Yeah, I have a question. So mobile devices have made us all more mobile. That means we are all more out of the office, remote locations. And that means we are more reliable, we need a more reliable device, that little device, and we are so dependent on it. Occasionally they do fail and they run into problem. And, let me attend TiE functions and still reply to my boss' email. Now, we run into problems sometimes. It happened to me recently where I had an important meeting, I was expecting an email with the important data, and here I have a problem with the device. How have you given a thought about how quickly and how to make the applications or your containers reliable enough, or how can I quickly come back up working mode, not spending 10 hours on a help desk call, or if I don't have a connectivity? Have you given a thought in your solution how to address that?
Yeah, very much so. It's all about user experience. I keep repeating that because you have to think ground up, the uptime, how will the help desk, how much it should be necessary. How much help desk call have you made using your Bank of America native app? Or even Angry Birds or something like that. They haven't, because it's designed from ground up. So this is exactly, you make a good point. You have to select the solution which is ground up designed for the UX. So we have taken great care about this very much. Scalability, we are being deployed like Chevron worldwide. So load balancers all over the map, multiple servers talking to each other, able to quickly come up. Same thing on the device level, not go down. Extensive QA, worldwide distributed. So those are issues. So the solutions which are coming now are much more robust than what you have seen in 2 years ago.
I'm a semiconductor guy.
On the apps front, for example, one deploys apps that are native and can work offline, sync back up, those kind of things. There are clearly more points of failure in a mobile environment than in a landline and others. So there are things you can do, but it'll take a while before it gets to the same level of reliability at least.
In the consumer apps, how much trouble do you have with iPhone apps?
Yeah.
That's actually.
Yeah, so again, just to add to what you were saying, so when you go and talk to a CIO, CIOs, by the way, as you know, they're not technologists. Many of them are business guys, right? They're trying to solve problems. So they talk about SLAs, right? So one of the key aspects of, many of us, we are in the enterprise space, right? So the expectations from us are the same as you expected from enterprise when you were running an enterprise app inside the enterprise, right? But now you are dealing with very, there are multiple links. If you look at the topology, from a mobile device or a carrier network, then it goes into the internet, and then it finally gets to your corporate or wherever the data is in the cloud or whatever. So one aspect, one area is that we haven't touched upon, but it's a piece of technology that we provide to our customers, is called mobile service management. So once you have given them, once they've installed the apps, they are bound to get into trouble one day, which means that they will run an app and they will not see that data show up. So IT needs to be proactively anticipating and seeing those things on a console saying, customer X or user X is having a problem, so that when you call them, they can very quickly triage the problem. So the same issue which we used to call monitoring and troubleshooting in enterprise environment, enterprise devices, the same problem exists on this side also. And it has to be addressed so that we can provide a very high SLA, especially to the end users who are using these mobile devices.
Let me add just a couple of. Number one is that make sure you get a carrier network which has good coverage. Find the best one. The other one is the application guys have responsibility. We're seeing these days, I didn't expect average apps being written in corporation is half a gig. You know what they're doing? Content, all kind of thing they're putting together, so you have offline access. And so that's it's really about making sure that you can do certain things offline and without relying on carriers, and then also make sure you get the best carrier network. Those two, everyone has to step up to deliver that. It's not one another.
Okay, I've been a semiconductor guy, so I do believe a little bit in Moore's law. Quad-core phones have started to come in the marketplace, so assuming next 3-4 years that continues, so I can see at least from mobile phone getting more powerful. They may not be as powerful ever as laptop or desktop, but I can imagine a mobile phone sitting in a docking station in office doing some of the work. So if that happens, how would it transform the field that we've been discussing over the past half an hour or an hour or so?
First of all, actually you're absolutely right. I mean, if you look at the latest, let's say the iPhone and the iPad, these are multiple cores. And not only do they have a CPU, but they also have a GPU, graphical processing unit. That's why you get that wonderful experience. I think what will happen if I were to put on my vision hat on is that, first of all, you're right, Moore's law will apply, and we will get a lot of computing power. And it's all going to be about data. It's all going to be about that, because it's all about data now. This voice is finished, right? So I think we will see much more richer immersion, like video conferencing and all of those things will become much more real. So you can see Skype, Skype. Just imagine Skype, but you're now sitting with such a wonderful user experience because the bandwidth will grow, the CPU will grow. So I think it's going to allow very wonderful, much more richer applications to be available on these devices.
I think, at RIM, as we look ahead, one of the things we definitely see is there's already a lot of talk about, tablets potentially replacing the laptops, at least for a certain segment of the market. It may not apply to everybody, but enterprise customers are certainly increasingly asking the question, do we need to continue investing in the laptop for everybody? And likewise, if you look at a high-end sort of exec, what are the typical type of applications that exec runs? Email, maybe some office apps to browse. So they don't need a full-end PC. And then certainly rich media apps, as Wahid mentioned, applies. I actually follow video conferencing closely, and there's companies like Blue Jeans Network and Video with Avaya, etc., that have been, and certainly Cisco and Polycom, etc., have invested multi-fold in video. They've all got mobile apps now, but I don't think they've hit what Malcolm Gladwell calls the tipping point yet. And one of the reasons they've not quite hit it is because the video experience on a tablet is still not compelling enough. Having said that, the tablet reduces the cost of entry into video, because now you don't need an expensive in-room Cisco telepresence system to get into video conferencing. So I think that's one thing, and also I follow a lot of sports. I'm a big sports fan, and I've noticed over the last few months, I mean, ESPN is investing heavily in the Watch ESPN app, and so I think that ESPN watching behavior is shifting gradually from the TV to the iPad also. And I think that's another, again, a trend that's occurring, and at the same time, the processing power on the device is just one element of the ecosystem. And I think that's what Ajay and Salil mentioned earlier, because it's the whole ecosystem that has to, all the enablers have to be compelling to deliver a compelling experience, and that's what I see there.
Well, by the ecosystem argument, that's a correct point, but I think the local power with the quad-core and multi-core coming down the path, the big thing will be natural language processing. Able to take the son of C, that able to do a lot more interaction with voice, because that requires local processing of natural language and able to syntaxically access data. So able to access corporate data in a much, much smarter way than today. You see a lot of compute power will be used there. And of course, video is huge. We haven't even seen the tip of the iceberg yet. So video have a profound effect the way we work, the way we connect with people. You tell me, for the last 100 years, we've been fighting traffic, putting on the monkey suit to drive through a building. Why? Because that's where the people were, that's where the data was. Enterprise mobility addresses both of those things, brings it to you. You don't no longer have to wear the monkey suit and fight the traffic. That has a profound impact of how we live as a society. And that's why the topic of the panel, why enterprise is the biggest thing in mobility, darn right it is.
So we're out of time. I'll ask one question to each of the panelists. Being that this is a entrepreneurship forum, what is the one opportunity that you see in this space that that you'd like to share, or for budding entrepreneurs?
I see two opportunities. One of them is that make sure you capture the next business cycle, which is coming soon. Mobile is just starting. We are in early labs, 100 more labs to go. So make sure that think big and make something. And they catch the next business cycle, which is about to begin soon. And the second thing is that there's lots of companies who make zero money on mobile today. Zero. Does it go and drive on Sand Hill Road and say, do they make any money on mobile? No. Do they make any more money on mobile? No. All those guys need to buy something. So whatever cats and dogs, whatever they need to buy. So make sure there's an opportunity for that. There's a lot of small technologies if you have, they could go ahead and acquire you. So those are the two opportunities I see if I was the starting from scratch. For the going big, capture the next business cycle. Going small, just every company I'm done, 237, just say, do they have anything on mobile? No. What do they need? Think about it.
So look, I cannot guess what is out there, but I'll tell you this. Silicon Valley repeats. Everything that happened some time ago will happen again. So go back to 1997. This is 1996 of the internet. This is the 1996 of the mobile space. It's just starting. We have just scratched the surface. There's so many opportunities, and every day sometimes our investors call us to look at companies. There's so much to be done, and I sometimes say, oh my God, that's a really cool idea. So I think there's lots of opportunities, as Ajay mentioned also. There's going to be a lot of acquisitions, but either way, if you think carefully and you understand what the users want, I think you will do very well.
From our perspective at SAP, we built out our application suite over 30 years, and we think it'll get mobilized in the next 2 to 3 years. One of the things we recognize is the fact that we'll probably only be able to build internally maybe 10-20% of it. I think 80% of it is going to be built by someone else. And I see the biggest opportunity there for a lot of people to participate and add value to enterprises at least. there's a ton of other opportunity. I believe we're just scratching the surface, but that's one that stares me in the face right now.
I think when you look around, and even a lot of the topics we've touched upon today, including management and security, a lot of people would broadly classify as being in the hygiene area. Because, since mobile is so new, we are still trying to make sure it's, we've secured it, we've protected it from a hygiene standpoint. But when I look ahead, I think there's still a lot of work and opportunity to use mobile, because mobile enables a new class of apps and things that were defined a certain way in the desktop are in some ways defined differently on mobile. And so what are the opportunities to improve the ROI of an enterprise because of mobile? Because now the mobile user, enterprise user, can do something that they couldn't in the past.
So I think if you ask for advice for budding entrepreneurs, I would say that, look, I've been doing, this is my 7th startup, so I've done it a few times. I used to think what really mattered was the technology. Gotta have the right technology. Then I've learned, technology, forget the technology, that will come and go. It's the team, it's the right team, gotta have the right team. Yeah, team is very important, but if you listen to VCs, the market size. My current learning is forget all that. The most important thing in a startup is timing. If you time it right, all boats rise when the tide rises. And this is the thing which Ajay said very well, we gotta catch the next big business.
You have to be number one in that market.
You have to be. So this is why I want to conclude by saying the following quotation from Victor Hugo. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Ladies and gentlemen, our time has come.
To add, because some of you are thinking right now, you remember I grew up in India, and there was a bank. When I used to go, when I was young, I used to go to bank, and you go to the bank, you got a guard up in the front of the door, and the guy is scared. You quickly go get the money and get out of it. Look at the newer bank; they feel welcoming. There's no one with a gun. It's still in Asia, but here standing, and the new bank actually makes you welcoming, and new services are enabled. And there's a whole bunch of new services and new innovation happening in the bank compared to the old bank. And the new banks are not less secure. They are more secure than the old bank. So just trying to say that mobile is not about just the security. There's a lot more, the cultural shift, the business transformation, all kind of things going to happen. And there's an opportunity for entrepreneurs to be part of that in different level of the stacks. So think about it, that how would the new bank look like with the mobile enabled, and what are the opportunity for the services, and how would the company culture changes and creates all kind of new services. So that's the opportunity, and that's what I say as an entrepreneur, that we are still in the first 10 labs, 90 more to go. And it's really you look back 10 years from now and say, wow. Those days they were talking about the security, now it's all about services and about new opportunities.
The problem is that the banks don't have much money, that's why.
Okay. So, thank you, Nil. Like Ajay and the panelists said, I also believe, because I've been, for last, since '94, I've been doing entrepreneurial things, good, bad, both, tons of money raised, tons of money lost. So I also feel that, like what he said, it's a cycle. So I do believe this whole mobile thing is a great cycle. Just focus on it, and I hope we can have some few of them entrepreneurs here. We can feature in my story next year who have sold it over 100 million plus, their companies. And I think there is a great opportunity. I really agree with, kind of just saying, that's what I also try to analyze. We have to see whether we hit it, but I think it's a great opportunity. With that, let's give a big round of applause to Nirav and the whole panelists for the time to be here. Thank you again. So they'll be here for a few minutes, and Dance usually has a very good trick. He just switches on and off light. That means get the heck out of here. All right, have a wonderful evening. Thank you. Sure.